Maybe you feel like time is slipping away and the pressure to conceive is weighing you down. That's why I'm so excited to talk with Beth Galata, a licensed mental health counselor and host of Quiet the Clock podcast, to talk about breaking free from fertility timelines, how to advocate for your health, and really shifting your mindset in the face of setbacks. So, whether you're struggling with conception, feeling unheard by doctors, or just simply needing some encouragement, this episode is for you. Feeling like this whole baby making journey is never going to work out. You've done it all: diet changes, supplements, tracking your cycle, and yet the pregnancy test is negative. It's so frustrating, and you're asking yourself, why isn't this happening for us? I'm Susan Gladstein, a holistic fertility coach and mom to 7, including 2 miracle babies after a vasectomy reversal, and I get it. Being told everything looks fine by doctors while still feeling stuck can leave you feeling hopeless and confused. On this podcast, I'll share practical, natural ways to support your fertility without all the overwhelm. Forget the everything's normal talk and the rush into fertility treatments. I'm here to show you a better way. If you're ready to take practical steps that fit with God's plan for your family, you're in the right place. I truly believe that you can have the baby you've been praying for. I am super excited to have Beth here. We've already been chatting for, 15 minutes or something about all of the things. She has been doing amazing work. I love her podcast, Quiet the Clock. You've got to go listen to it. But I would really love for you to tell us your story and what was the inspiration behind your podcast and kind of just the journey that's led you here to advocate for women who are struggling with fertility.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, it was sort of born out of my own personal journey and my work as a therapist. I never intended to do a podcast. I never thought I'd be talking about these topics, particularly fertility. But I just sort of saw things happening again, personally and professionally, where there was so much anxiety for women, especially women in their 30s, that weren't meeting these milestones that society was telling us we should meet by a certain time. So if we weren't partnered up in our, later 20s or early 30s and not getting married and not having children, like this linear blueprint that's been so ingrained in us and has kind of been the narrative and the expectation for so long, for a lot of women, that's not how it lines up. And there were not enough conversations around like, it's okay if it doesn't line up. Like it can be really great if it doesn't line up, and sort of empowering different journeys, different timelines was not happening. And for me personally, I didn't meet my partner until 34. And that, at that time it was like late in the game. Everyone around me was probably maybe even on their second baby. So there was a lot of like angst and anxiety and sadness that came up for me around that because I'm comparing it to the blueprint and the timeline I was sold. You fast forward in this great relationship, and for us personally, like timeline for children didn't line up. So at 37, I froze my eggs. So simultaneously, as I'm going through this personally, I'm meeting with a lot of and working with a lot of 30-something-year-old women as a therapist who are feeling the same things. And I'm like, man, a lot of us are going through this and no one is talking about it. So I started having conversations with more and more women. And someone was like, you should do a podcast. And so kind of planted that seed. It was probably a year later when I started the podcast. But we've been doing it for almost 2 years now and having incredible conversations around all things, not just fertility, but timeline, societal expectations, dating, relationships, authenticity, like getting really clear on what we want for ourselves, in what order, what time. And fertility is a big part of that. It is like we do have a biological clock, and you and I were talking before we hit record on, so there's some really like fear-based narratives that are just so outdated. This idea that the fertility cliff is 35 is like, let's just stop with that now. So yeah, that's kind of what led me to do the podcast, and it's been incredible. And now I'm on the secondary infertility journey, so it's sort of even expanded more of what I'm talking about on the podcast because we're not talking about this enough. We're like so miseducated, we're so misinformed, we're so misguided. And women and men too, we deserve the information. We deserve to know, like, what is this all really about?
Yes, as someone who had a baby at 40 and then pregnant again at 44, like I'm wholeheartedly on this quest to sort of change that narrative because so many of my clients are, older in age, and I got a lot of grief at 40, and it was during 2020, so maybe some of it was just the craziness of the world at the time, but I definitely felt the pressure in the 2 years after my husband's reversal. I was 38. I've got to hurry up. I never had trouble getting pregnant. His numbers were looking great post reversal, and they just told me everything's like normal on my lab work, and there was no reason that we couldn't get pregnant, but we just needed to go straight to IUI or IVF. And we did one round of IUI. I had a whole bunch of tests done, and it did not sit well with me that that was the next step. I kind of started dabbling into more of a holistic approach and sort of getting away from Western medicine as it is during that time. But it also, to me, just sort of took the magic out of what I
Mm,
felt like was intended for this process. And I know that there's a time and place for it, and
yeah.
all of that. But I find that so much, I mean, obviously you go into fertility, and we were talking about this, you go to a fertility clinic, they sell you on the products that they have available, which is, other alternative methods, which is why I'm really passionate about what I do in exploring holistic practices, because even if you are spending tens of thousands of dollars for these treatments, if your baseline foundation of health is not good, you're not going to have as great of outcomes. And that there's a whole other like emotional thing that comes with all of that a lot of people don't really prepare you for at the clinic, like even just nutritionally, what should you eat if you're trying to spike and have way more eggs produced than you would normally. It's like, well, if you're not producing one healthy egg, how are you expecting to get five, six, a dozen? Are
I
you
have a
eating for that, right?
Yeah, I have a strong curiosity about how much fertility doctors actually know in terms of diet, lifestyle, supplementation. I don't want to like badmouth anybody, and I can stick specifically to my experience. I just don't think there's education for them around it. And so if that is the case, what I would love to see happen is like, I'm not knowledgeable in that, but here, go to this person or here, talk to this person. I think what's happening instead is they're saying, that doesn't matter. You don't need that supplement. That has nothing to do with anything. We did my second transfer, my first transfer did not implant. My second transfer did. And then I had a miscarriage at, the heartbeat appointment. There was no heartbeat. Obviously, like, I don't want to talk about that lightly. It was extremely devastating. And that was the moment where I finally got a full thyroid panel. And I can back up. Like my first transfer, I was not knowledgeable about any of this, even as a woman that had frozen her eggs, even as a woman that had had a child, even as a woman that was kind of starting to have conversations around those things. I was still so uninformed about what it was to do a transfer. What are some things that we should be looking at? So my THS was 2.94. So, you kind of do your own research, and I'm seeing it should be at like 2.5, but the clinic is reassuring me, no, 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 it's fine, it's fine. They only measure that. They don't do a full thyroid. So they put me on levothyroxine, which if we fast forward, that was the completely wrong medication for me to be on. And the first transfer didn't even implant. Go on to the second, still on the same medication that's not right for me. Still no full thyroid panel. Go into a second transfer that implants and I miscarry. And that after the second miscarriage is finally when I get a full thyroid panel, which to me at this point, and now knowing everything I know now, I never would have even gone forward with the first transfer. So to me, it is so criminal that these two things have to happen. And I mean, let's not even get into the emotional weight of that, the loss of two embryos. But after a miscarriage is when I'm finally getting a full thyroid panel, and my antibodies were over 900. My thyroid antibodies were over 900. And then my fertility doctor looked at me and said, that has nothing to do with your miscarriage. You don't even need to worry about that, which was wrong, completely wrong. Luckily, I had enough wherewithal to seek other resources and seek other help. And that's where it started my journey down around more holistic healing, more lifestyle changes, because I didn't just take that at face value. Now, if I was a woman that did, transfer number 3, transfer number 4, transfer number 5, all my embryos are gone. So it's really unfortunate what's happening. Again, I don't want to, completely badmouth. I think maybe it's you have to go back to the educational system and medical school and they have to like prioritize some of these things. But it's not happening right now, or at least it wasn't my experience in sort of the Western medical fertility world.
And I see that a lot. I had another gal on my podcast recently that it was kind of the same thing where they, fundraised and saved up all this money because they were told IVF was their only answer, and some questions that she had, like in her gut, that she had endometriosis, was just denied by the doctors. And then so they go through the process and it doesn't work, which is horrific and devastating. And it's like, well, you just need to try again. They're like, I don't have the money to do this again, but I really want a baby. And then she also started going more of a holistic route. And right away, the acupuncturist is like, sis, you've got endometriosis. And she had to have surgery and all sorts of things. Like she would have never had success in the state that she was in had she kept going down that route. But when you want a baby like yesterday, which I totally get,
Yeah, it goes
you're
without
willing to do whatever. But I think it's important to like really just have the conversation about advocating for yourself and your own health, because nobody knows your body better than you. But we're all sort of just taught like, oh, you're the doctor, you know best, and I'm just going to listen to you. So I think it's like a really important to advocate for yourself, to ask questions.
Oh,
Why?
yeah.
Because a lot of times, like even statistically, when they give you really small chances, what is that based off of? Is that based off of you, your history, what you
I
have
mean, and
going
that's,
on?
yeah.
Or
I
is
mean,
that like a
that's,
generalized thing of somebody who's in a completely different boat?
yeah, and that's what I'm kind of sick of. And I kind of said this to my fertility doctor. We kind of got into it a little bit because, at this point, I've had 3 transfers with genetically tested embryos, 2 didn't implant, and 1 miscarriage. And then I've had pregnancies, 2 IUIs, and a natural pregnancy. So, we can't just say it's because it's genetically abnormal embryos. So it's like, what do we do at this point? Like she's like, you don't like my answer. She's like, you don't like my answer. This is IVF and the science and the science, the science. I'm like, what is your science? Like, I don't, it's just, you can't, that can't, and I'm just tired of that answer. Like, that can't be a good enough answer. And, I'm sure there's other fertility doctors out there that are more hopefully integrative and willing to look outside the box. And she's not. And I have to leave her now because I'm like, we've been down this road. We have 3 situations with embryos. We have 3 situations with IUIs and natural pregnancies. Like something else is up. Um, but the avocation, of course, is so, so important. But what I have found is one, you have to have the knowledge to ask the questions. And I went after my first miscarriage, I went down the whole rabbit hole of reading every single thing to the point where my partner's like, you need to stop. And I was in tears. I'm like, no, I was like, I have to have the information to ask the questions. Like, I didn't have it at that first transfer. I didn't have it at the second transfer. So I need to be equipped. And that's the first thing in being able to advocate is having the information. The second thing is like, you can't accept because the doctors will come back at you, even when you're advocating, they'll come back at you and they'll say, no, no, my doctor, I now, because where I am now, we're doing with a different doctor, a whole immunological workup. She's like, no, you're not there yet. No, you don't need an HSG. Went and did that with a different doctor, and I did need it. So even when you're advocating, they're still going to come back at you, and you have to keep pushing. And if they're not going to do it, go to somebody else.
Yes, for sure. And I think for me and a lot of my clients, like I will see them, we have our first consult, and I see it on their face. Like they're just like I was when I so desperately just wanted a baby. And everything about our process to have the reversal, from the finances to pay for it, because it's not cheap, time off of work for my husband, like everything was so miraculous. And I thought it was just going to happen right away. And then when it didn't, I started
Mm,
giving into the narrative that it's too late, I'm running out of time, it's never going to happen. And when I see my clients, it's very like visually see all of that input coming in
yeah.
from the outside that just wears on them. And I usually spend my whole first consultation just talking around, like, I believe this for you. It's going to happen. And by the next call, when I talk to them, they look completely different. Now, there are things that we would implement, obviously, from a holistic perspective, like things that I see that needs to help build the foundation that you need. Because in reality, good health, longevity is going to be like fertility is a byproduct of that. So
Mm-hmm.
I know that the end goal for most people is always about getting pregnant. I personally, when I started this sort of holistic journey, I was thinking about what my life was going to look like when I was in my 70s, 80s,
Oh,
90s.
that's amazing. Yeah.
And so, in that sense, like fertility is a byproduct of just overall good health. Because if you're stressed and your body senses any kind of stress, it's not going to like open up its arms and welcome another life form that's going to like literally suck the life out of you.
I know it's so hard
And
though.
so I think like even just like the mindset and having conversations like this where yes, the medical community is telling you like, oh, there's only a 5% chance, or I know for a lot of people like IVF is 12 to 20% success rate, which when you hear that, like you want to think that you are in that small percentage. But let's talk about being in the 90%. Like this is going to work for you and having sort of that mindset that, yes, it's going to work. It's going to happen. And I'll tell you, like, in the last week, I've gotten 3 emails from my clients within 2 months of working together, have had their positive pregnancy test. But when I first met them, like I saw it in
Oh,
their
I'm in
face.
it. I'm in it. I'm in it. And I'm, for me, with each loss and each hurdle, like I have dove into something. So after the first one, it was kind of like reading all the books and revamping the whole lifestyle, like throwing out my whole kitchen, all my products. And then the one after that, I think I dove deeply into like thyroid. So, but because like it's this desire to control and do everything right. And really where I have it, and this is like, you know, hysterical because I'm a therapist and this is the work I do all the time. The one place I haven't been attentive enough is my mind, is my mindset. And, I got pregnant with my son at 39. I had him at 40 right away. No issues. So I go into this first transfer with that belief, like, of course it's going to work. You're just going to pop this thing in and it's going to work. And it's been really devastating to watch it not work for so, so long. So the hope ebbs and flows and the thought that it's like it will work. Even today, I'm sharing this with you before we started recording. I'm fighting the thoughts and the narratives that are telling me like it's not going to work, and maybe we're a family of three, and it's difficult. But yeah, I agree with you. Like the mindset is so important. I was on someone's podcast yesterday and she shared with me like having this, and she also had all three of her kids in her 40s, which is like I want to like pause and like thank the universe for like meeting with her yesterday and meeting with you today. Both women having babies in their 40s naturally. Like I think that's like a sign for me. And it's so reassuring to hear that. But she held on to this deep knowing that it was going to happen. So that mindset was so powerful.
It is so powerful because that quote's like, whether you believe or you don't, you're right, right? So, and just the way that our minds work, and you know this as a therapist, but like if we're always trying to maintain equilibrium and anything that feels new, even if it's like starting a new habit, like working out or whatever, it does cause some sort of stress when you're going outside of your comfort zone or your normal routine. And so our bodies are going to do things to sort of like self-sabotage to keep us safe because it thinks that the stress is going to be, detrimental, even though it's something that's good. And so we can sort of set ourselves up for failure if we're believing the
Yeah.
negative, because then we're going to do things that are going to basically, our actions will go in that same line.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely like the work for me right now is to get my mind right. Yeah. I think I believe in all that wholeheartedly. I really, really do. it just gets hard to stay there when like nothing works. And I was having this conversation with someone else, maybe the same podcast I was on, is like, it's not just like a negative pregnancy or a miscarriage, it's like a bad lab or something comes back, or it's like you're not, or the numbers don't look right, with a functional medicine doctor, by the way, not fertility doctor. And it's also like you start to, at least I did, adopt this idea of like, what's wrong with my body? Like, what is happening? Why can't my body do this? Like, what has happened to my body since my son? Like, how was I able to have my son? And it's just this, yeah, it's this grief about your body of like, what is your body doing? And then for me, I mean, if you look at me, you would think like I'm a healthy person, but I would have lab after lab coming back suggesting like I had all these things off on inside of my body. And I'm just like, how am I this unhealthy? So there's all these little like losses and griefs, and it's very complex and nuanced. It's not solely like it didn't work, it didn't implant, it miscarried. It's all these other things. And then it's like, the lack of answers that this is IVF. Like, no, it's not good enough.
Well, I'm curious too, even just like your experience with, you know, your thyroid, because it's like, I mean, it is the gateway for all your other hormones, but like they
Who
never
knew?
test it in the holistic, they'll maybe look at one thing and not the rest of it to see how. I mean, that's the thing that's been most eye-opening for me, getting more into the holistic side, is how everything is integrated into one another. It's like, you go to a specialist for this one thing, but that one thing is affected by this other thing. And so that's why I personally really tried to like peel back all of the layers of everything within the fertility world. And sometimes it's uncomfortable because like I'm asking you questions about what do you eat? And that might be triggering for some who are like me and we're emotional eaters at some point, or even if you think you're eating healthy. I mean, there was a time in my life where
Oh,
I
yes,
thought I was doing all
yes.
the right things, but it was like the very thing I thought I was doing was causing digestive problems and
Mhm.
migraines. And I just kind of accepted it as my sort of like cross to bear, where I had really poor gut health. And I just thought that that's how normal, like I didn't know how bad I felt until I felt good. And so,
Yes, right. Like how long are we operating suboptimally for so long? It's our normal, and we don't even realize we actually feel like shit all the time. Yeah.
but I think even just, you know, understanding like your issues with your thyroid. Could you just tell us about that experience? Because I think it is probably, well, I know it's way more common than anyone really talks about
Yeah.
or even realizes to ask the question. Of course, most of my clients are very hyper focused on male fertility after reversal. They've spent all
Sure,
this
right.
money and they want to know, how do I improve sperm health? But at the same time, I like to focus on the couple as a whole because there is a lot of things that women could and should be doing just to feel good overall and to balance
Yeah.
their hormones. And, it's always that thing that they're like, oh, your AMH is, you know, low and you have no egg quality and whatever. And it's like, well, I got an email this week from a girl that was told that and she's pregnant. So I'm
I mean, you're,
not
and
going to
you're
buy
hearing,
into it.
yeah, I mean, you're hearing more. Well, that's the other thing that's like, through my experience, I'm realizing like there's no integration between the fertility world, Western fertility world, and the holistic world, because fertility world be like, you cannot improve your egg quality at all. They don't believe in that at all. And then you have people over here being like, yes, you can do all of these things. And again, I'm super curious. Is it just a lack of education? And what's right? They're literally like, we might as well be speaking completely different languages. In terms of my thyroid health, like what I know now, again, I would have changed everything that I did previously. I would say to anyone like going into, if they're doing a transfer or even trying to get pregnant, is demand a full thyroid panel. Demand it. I would say go to a holistic functional medicine doctor, because even when you get the full panel, I don't think they understand it. I don't think they know how to read it. I don't think they know how to treat it. So finding a specialist to do that is important. Um, I didn't know what the high antibodies meant. I mean, it's like, people listening probably know, you go into your portal, you get your blood work, you look at it and you see the thing that's off. And mine was off the charts. So I called my doctor and she's like, "Oh, it doesn't matter. It's like suboptimal, whatever she said. It doesn't, don't worry about it." And then you do your own research and then I got put on the levothyrox in November 2023. I was on that till August 2024 until I saw my first functional medicine doctor. He's like, that doesn't work. That's not what you need. I needed an MP thyroid, which is T4 and T3, because I wasn't converting. They don't even tell you the importance of T3 when you're trying to get pregnant. Like, and their Western medical ranges, I think was like mine was probably at a 2 something. That's within range. Optimal for pregnancy is at least like I think 3.4, 3.6. So I was completely misled. And to your point earlier, we kind of just like trust these doctors and they know what they're telling us. And in a lot of cases, they don't, especially when it comes to things more specific like thyroid or again, lifestyle or supplementation. And I think I never like to say wasted time, but I think I lost a lot of time to get to a place where, okay, finally, August 2024, I'm finally right on the right thyroid medication because I went to a different doctor. And then you start to learn things like, for me so I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's, and you start to learn things of like, don't have gluten, gluten, dairy, soy, like try to stay away from those things, which is difficult. But if I want to work on my overall health, like those are the things I'm willing to do. And, throughout all of this too, I've tried to look at like the silver lining of like, I wouldn't have discovered the thyroid issue, or I also have anemia. I wouldn't have discovered any of these things. I wouldn't have done this extensive testing or blood work if it wasn't for the goal of having a second baby. So I do acknowledge sort of the silver lining of that. But the thyroid is so important. It's so important, period, but it's so important and integral to healthy pregnancies. And it's overlooked and misdiagnosed and again mistreated.
Yes. In my sort of prior life, dealing with more on the metabolism side for women, because most everybody was, my clients were focused on weight loss primarily. And it's always like, oh, well, these numbers in your thyroid are off. Like, let's just give you this medication, but without really fully looking at the big picture and how that's going to affect all of these other hormones in the body. And nutritionally, are you doing the right things to like set yourself up for success? So for me, in the same vein, in the 2 years that it took us to get pregnant, and I really got very diligent after spending so many years thinking like, oh, everybody else needs my attention and like always putting myself last. And I really prioritized my health. And then that's when I discovered how bad I actually felt. But then I was a much better mom for it, having those foundations. And I talk about it in my podcast all the time, like how my 4-year-old knows to prioritize protein before carbs, or like don't eat your carbs naked. And people always talk about her really long, luscious locks. And I'm like, well, it's because she prioritizes protein. That's why her hair looks so good all the time. Like, but a lot of kids, you know, don't eat that way. In fact, last night she was asking me, like, Mom, can I have some yellow curry? And I'm like, what 4-year-old is asking for
No,
Thai
I
food?
wish, my God, my 3.5-year-old, no way. That's amazing. Yeah, it's like it's the habits. It's, and you're setting her up for such success. And we're not really, kind of like finding out too late, sort of, especially if we're talking about what can help support fertility, we're finding out a little too late what can support, fertility, health, egg quality. And I talk a lot about egg freezing on my podcast. And, everything I've learned now, I'm kind of like, do these things for 3 months before you freeze your eggs. Like, you will help your outcome tremendously. I know that's controversial. I know that's not believed in the Western medical fertility world. But again, we without that information, we're kind of just like going about our lives. I will say, I can't even remember. I got pregnant with my son at 39. I wasn't doing any of this stuff. I wasn't taking all these supplements. I was probably drinking more than I should. I definitely wasn't cutting out dairy and gluten, all these things. And I was probably still stressed. I was building, my business and my practice, and I still got pregnant. And I think that kind of goes into like the whole spiritual side and all of that. But yeah, we deserve to have this information. We deserve to know what we can do to take our fertility health into our own hands. And I don't know, again, at the same time, it's a business. Are we not being told these things because we want women to freeze their eggs? And again, I'm a big advocate for freezing our eggs, but like, let's optimize. Um, like to your point earlier, are we wanting to just push women to IVF because it's expensive? And it's a lucrative business. Yeah, again, I don't know. I'm not like saying that's only it, but it's like if we're being realistic, that's part of it.
It, yes. Well, and it's, I always talk about, I heard um, a colleague talking about how, like, yeah, if you go to a fertility clinic, they're going to sell you on what they have to offer. It's like if you go to a shoe store, they're not going to try to sell you on candy. So, like, it makes sense, but at the same time, I don't, just the education piece on setting people up for the best possible outcomes.
Right. Yeah. And to your point earlier, like some women definitely need IVF. Some people definitely need intervention, but like give someone all the information, give them the correct information. I mean, the amount of times I've heard endometriosis be like misdiagnosed or just like not diagnosed for so many years or PCOS. We need to be giving women the full picture, the full picture. And I wonder if you say to women like, you could take 6 months and heal your gut, heal your thyroid, do all these things to improve, balance your hormones. You could get pregnant naturally. And maybe women will say, okay, I want to try that before I spend $30,000, pump myself with medication and needles and all those things. But we're not given, I don't think we're often enough given all the options.
Hmm. Well, and I, that's what I really hope to do on this podcast is sort of like change the narrative on just the foundation that you're building, because so many times they think like, oh, well, I've had the reversal done and I'll just get pregnant right away. And then when it doesn't happen, like the the mental load that like the negativity that it sort of breeds each month, the emotional ups and downs, even just trying to conceive in general, when you're
Yes,
hyper
yes.
focused on this is the window and it's got to happen, and then like you stop connecting with your spouse. So like I'm all about like let's take a step back, like let's bring joy into this
Mhm.
situation, because when your baby comes and you're low on sleep and all of these, you know, kids are crazy and they're always interrupting and you never have time with your spouse. But if you don't have that foundation, health wise, relationship wise, that's really strong, it just makes everything a little bit worse to deal with, when
Totally. Oh my
you're
gosh.
sleep
Everything is
deprived and you can't connect. And
Yeah, everything is about having a strong foundation. And I think it's another kind of potentially harmful narrative that it's so easy to get pregnant, right? So it's like most of our lives are being told, like, don't get pregnant, don't, safe sex, all of these things, as if it's like I think there's this because of that those kind of narratives, it's been this understanding that I get to decide when I have children. So whenever I'm ready, it's going to happen. And for some people it does happen like that and that's wonderful and beautiful, but for a lot of people it doesn't. So we need to kind of like move away from this idea or this narrative of like when I'm ready it'll happen and it often it doesn't. And that's the narrative I held like okay, we're going to transfer this embryo and it's going to work. And it's like so it's disappointing, period, but it's so much more deeply disappointing when you hold this idea that's like, oh, it's just going to work when I want it to work. And it's definitely not the case. And even after having the first miscarriage and all the books that I read on the research I did, I was like, wow, it's like everything has to happen perfectly in your body for fertilization, implantation. It was crazy to me. I'm like, how are all these kids walking around? Like, this is so freaking hard. It's not easy. It's like everything has to kind of like perfectly align and have it was wild to me.
yeah, I that's one thing that I really like to just pause a lot with my clients and like let's take a step back. Like I know you want a baby yesterday, and understanding even just from sperm health post reversal, like sperm take 3 months to regenerate. So you
Mm,
can't expect to go like, oh, it's kind of like those memes where it's like, I ate salad for lunch. Have I lost 50 pounds, already?
mm,
But it's like anything that you're doing now is going to make a big impact, but you won't see that right away. So,
right.
yes, the expectations I think that we place on ourselves, like, oh, it's going to happen, just compound and make it so
Mhm.
much more difficult. But even just to your point about like the miscarriage thing, like for me personally, I was so just like hit with that reality. It wasn't something that I personally had experienced or dealt with or even emotionally knew what to do with. So when I got pregnant again, every part was like I was just sort of holding my breath, like, oh, I'm,
Mhm.
here I was like getting ready to retire from the military. I host retreats in Costa Rica. So I was getting ready for a retreat when I found
Oh,
out that I was pregnant. And I was like, I don't want to be in my first trimester and be really sick. And this is going to be terrible because I'm going to be tired and I can't deal with all this stuff in the first trimester. And had all this negative views. And maybe that contributed. I don't know. But I know that had all of these worries and fears about just like how my life was going to be changing with this pregnancy. And then it was like, I was on my retreat and I felt great. I had so much energy. And I was like, the Lord has really relieved me of this burden, only to come home and find out that I didn't have the baby that I didn't know that I wanted so much. And so
yeah.
when I got pregnant again, it was very, like every little thing was so emotionally triggered by that experience where I was like, I was almost expecting the shoe to drop again,
Oh yeah,
which is like a whole other hard thing, which is, I think it's so important to like talk about it because people always think like, oh, I'm the only one that's going through this. And then you find out that you're not actually alone in any of that. But I'm curious, like, what were some of the things that you in your experience, and I'm not trying to make light of any of that. Like there's still moments where I have like panic or whatever, and I just have to like tell myself like that is of the devil, and I just can't buy into it. But
yeah, no,
I think it's
it's
helpful to sort of just talk through that and like understand you're not alone and
yeah.
your
I mean, in
feelings
any
are
event,
valid.
like yeah, and even just kind of more like even not fertility related. Like that's why I started Quiet the Clock because it's important to talk about. There's a lot of women feeling the pressure of these timelines and these milestones they're not meeting and judging themselves about it. And you kind of have to take these things out of the dark. And so people know you're not alone, that there are other women and people going through the same exact things. And that's the importance of platforms like these and having communication and conversations around things like this. Um, pregnancy after miscarriage is something that's definitely, I don't think, talked about enough because I remember getting pregnant after my first miscarriage. And I'm not naturally an anxious person. Like, this is like, my anxiety was through the roof. Like, it was very difficult to manage. And I'm like, wow, like, I didn't anticipate this because you think, like, oh, you got pregnant and you're so happy. You're like, no, pregnancy after loss is not like we're just jumping through hoops. We're like terrified. We're holding our breath. Like this might be TMI, but if you feel anything kind of happening in your underpants, you're like, what the, oh my God. And you're like, for me, like terrified to go to the bathroom, terrified to wipe myself. Like pregnancy after miscarriage is horrible. It's horrible. It's very, very difficult. I've had multiple miscarriages now, so I don't know if I've like gotten better about that. And maybe it's like sort of this hopeless, I don't know. But the first pregnancy after my miscarriage was like very, very difficult to manage. But to your point, yeah, I think we do have to talk about it more because it is the reality. It's not all like rainbows and butterflies when you get that positive. And I think the thing that really like, there's so much grief with fertility. And I've thought about this a lot, like it robs you of so much. Like it robs you of like the joy. Like, when you see a positive pregnancy test, like for me now, it's like I have to stay pregnant. I don't need to I've been getting pregnant. So it's like it robs you of that joy and that excitement of the positive pregnancy test. Like something even silly is like, I've changed my workouts. I'm not doing any high intensity workout. And I took this boxing class the other day, not realizing it was going to be so high intensity, and but it was amazing. That the instructor was amazing, the energy was amazing, the music was amazing, and I'm doing this class that is so amazing for my mental health. And the whole time I'm thinking like, I can't be doing this. I can't do this again. I shouldn't be doing this now. Freaking out. So it just robs you of so much, and it's really difficult. And I hear everything you're saying. I believe wholeheartedly in everything you're saying in finding the joy and all of that and the importance of that. But it robs you of so much, and it's difficult to find the joy, and it's all consuming, and it's this, make sure you take the supplements, make sure you eat enough protein, make sure you don't do this work. It's just very, very consuming. And to your point earlier about like we wanted the baby yesterday, it's really that's where the value of patience comes in, but it is so hard. And we talk about timelines and time. It's like every month it doesn't work. It's like a month that's passing. And for me, it's a month further. It's a bigger age gap. It's a bigger age gap. So it's like it's very difficult to stay in joy. It's very difficult to stay patient.
Well, and I will tell you, so my kids are now 22 and almost 19, and I'm having a baby, and the age gap is the greatest because they think it's amazing and wonderful.
Oh, that's great.
Um, and I wholeheartedly believe that like God already knows your baby and he knows when it's coming, and we just have to trust that that timing is going to be perfect. And it's not an easy, like it's way easier said than done for
Right.
sure. But before we jump off, I'm really curious because I know that there's a lot of people who are just like, kind of maybe feel like they're floundering either in their journey or, you know, the the battle of the mind is a big, huge
Mhm.
thing to overcome. But what have you found to be most helpful in all of the ups and downs of your own journey?
What I've found most helpful for a couple things. One is most helpful for me to confide in people or speak to people that have been through this. And while I have a very loving circle and supportive circle, no one in my close inner circle has been through this. It's really kind of crazy because I still can't even believe. I said to my partner the other night, I was like, I can't believe this is my story. I can't even believe that this is my journey. But what has been helpful is connecting with other women that have been through this, get it, understand the grief of it. The other thing that's been really helpful to me is sort of grounding in this idea that there's a purpose to this journey and there's a purpose to why I'm going through this. And um, I think it is to share more. I think it is to advocate more. I think it is to educate a bit more. Um, I've held on to that, and also the purpose being of understanding my underlying health issues in general, so I can heal those things. Um, but I do trust that there's a purpose to this. There's a reason I'm going through this. I'm working to trust that the timing is right and it will happen when it's supposed to happen. But I would say the most helpful thing is the two most helpful things is people to talk to that get it and hanging on to this. There's a purpose in this journey.
I will agree in that because when I was in my weight in the hardest year of my life, like I had this positive pregnancy test only to find out I was not actually pregnant. And then the military's like, oh, you've got to go away for 6 months to the Middle East by yourself and leave everyone behind. And my grandfather passed away, my
Oh,
stepdad passed away, and their funerals, one was Friday, one was Saturday, and I left on Sunday for 6 months to the Middle East. And I was just so angry because all I wanted was a baby, like yesterday. And everything over the last year leading up to my husband's reversal and all of these things had been so miraculous that I felt like God was not listening to the one thing that I thought he'd placed on my heart and having another baby. And I heard him audibly tell me in my kitchen, do you not trust me? Look at all I've done.
mm,
And I was like,
jealous.
okay, I am going to
Mm,
trust you. But it was a conscious decision because every day I just wanted to like lay in my bed and eat chocolate and watch Netflix. But every day was a conscious decision that I didn't know what was going to happen next. And of course, I thought I wanted to get pregnant on this crazy. I had to go to Germany for a week, and my husband like dropped everything, flew over. We had this amazing time, like halfway through my deployment. And I'm like, I'm gonna get pregnant, and then I'm gonna go home, and it's gonna be great because everything was perfectly timed out.
mm.
And then when I didn't, I was devastated. And you know what? When it was 122 degrees with 90% humidity in the Middle East, I was thankful to not be pregnant at that time because it was horrifically awful. So
Yeah.
in that moment, I could take a step back and be like, okay, this is not what I intended, but it was
Mm,
the perfect timing. When the world shut down for COVID is when I got my positive pregnancy test.
yeah.
And so what was probably a really tough time for a lot of people. Like I had come out of a whole year of just
My
really
God, that's so hard, everything you went through. My God.
just really like going through all of these things and I didn't get my answer in what the purpose was for 3 years.
But now look what you're doing, the
And
work.
now I'm like, holy cow. Like
Yeah.
all of those ups and downs, the tough times, all of the foundational stuff that I went through, all of the like peeling back the layers of my own like childhood trauma and like all of this growth that happened in the 2 years of waiting for her, I wouldn't trade for anything. But I
Mm,
had to hold on to the hope, to
mm.
the knowing that there was purpose, that it was coming. I didn't know what it looked like, but I had just had to trust.
I know. You know what my latest fear is? Literally, like, came up today is, and I don't want to believe this, but it's coming up, and I'm being like very vulnerable and honest here, is like, what if my story is to be to go through all of this and it doesn't work, and then be the woman speaking to women of what you do when it doesn't work?
There is purpose, obviously, in that. But I really hold on to like, if it is in your heart
Mm, okay.
to have more kids, it's gonna happen.
Okay. I needed that. Okay.
I I don't know what it
Go
looks
in
like.
my
I
heart.
don't
Oh
know
my
in the
God.
time frame. I mean, I just was reading about this 47-year-old woman who got pregnant, and somebody was, oh, my sister-in-law this week was telling me about her 52-year-old client who got pregnant naturally
Wow.
after years and years, 20 years of trying.
Wow. Oh my God. God bless her. How do you stay in it for 20 years? Oh my God.
Well,
Wow.
and she was in a like not a great relationship, and they split up. She got in a new one, got pregnant right away. And
That
at
makes sense to
52,
me.
she is like so happy to have this baby. So it's like,
If
I
it's
don't
on
know,
your heart, if it's on your heart, it will happen.
lean lean into that because I don't think that you get that feeling. I'm a firm believer that any of that negative stuff that comes up is from the devil, and he just wants you to question.
Oh, okay.
He just wants you to have fear. He just wants you to think like, okay, Lord, are you listening? Oh,
Okay.
you're
I love
not?
that.
He wants you to question all of that. And so I wholeheartedly believe, and you're gonna join me here in a little bit and like, okay, yes, it's gonna
I'll be back.
happen.
I will be back.
You're gonna be sending me an email and I'm gonna be celebrating just like the three clients
Oh.
that I had this week that sent me their positive test. But I wholeheartedly believe that if it's on your heart, it'll happen. And we need to squash fears that want to creep in and take over because that's just adding stress. And when you spike your cortisol, you're not going to be as fertile. So we just have to like, so one of my guests on my podcast, she read a book called Hannah Anointing. It's about Hannah from the Bible, and she really wanted a baby.
Hmm.
And she said, and her name is Hannah also, but she read the book out loud to herself, and it was like basically a declaration of like, I'm going to be a
Mm,
mother. I'm going to be a mother. And she sort of just embodied this. I am a mother. I'm going to act as if it's already happened. So when you
mm,
start acting as if,
yeah,
you start doing things differently. You go to
totally.
bed on time, you stop doom scrolling, you like, you know, maybe you don't get the french fries and you opt for a salad. Like if you're acting as if, your habits will
Hmm.
follow. But in the same sense, you're not spiking your hormones to the sense where your body is like fearful. Instead, it's receptive. Like, yes, I'm
Hmm.
ready. Bring it. Bring it.
Yeah,
I'm going to nurture this baby.
I love that. I love that. I'm gonna take all of that with me.
Good. Well, I thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your
I'm happy.
story. And I'll make sure that your podcast info is in the show notes so people can find you at Quiet the Clock because it's so good and such a good conversation
You.
to have. And so many of my people need to hear that, you know.
Well, you're an inspiration,
Oh,
totally. I mean, you really are, and I thank you so much for having me, and thank you for what you're doing.
yeah, thank you. I have told my husband now, like getting pregnant at 44, I'm like, hey, how do you feel about being on the cover of People magazine for being like the world's oldest couple to have a baby naturally? And he's like, challenge accepted. So
Let's do it.
I'm like all about helping change the narrative on this
Doing
because
it.
yes, fertility rates are declining, but like there's so many things that we can do naturally to counter that
Really.
I just don't want to give in to that narrative. So thank you for help change that
Thank
things don't
you. And
have
thank
to
you.
be so
Yeah.
like you think that they or the world tells us they need to be. So
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you again for having me.
thank you. Thank you so much for joining me on Conceiving After Vasectomy Reversal. I hope you're feeling encouraged and more hopeful on your journey to growing your family. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who could use a little extra support. I absolutely love reading your reviews. They mean the world to me. Like, seriously, words of affirmation are my love language. So let's stay connected. Find me on Instagram at conceivingaftervr and join our Conceiving After Vasectomy Reversal Facebook community for even more support and encouragement. I believe that God placed the desire for a child on your heart for a reason, and I'm grateful to walk alongside you in this season, to encourage you, and to help you find joy in the journey, trusting that His plan is greater than we can ever imagine.
Thanks for listening.